My name is Dumisani Nkosi. In Johannesburg, that name doesn't just open doors. It builds the door, the mansion, and the entire high-rise surrounding it. Nkosi Holdings, real estate, mining, telecommunications. I was the CEO, the undisputed king of my domain. At 48, I lived in a massive glass and steel fortress in Sandhurst, overlooking the city's sprawl, a silent, glittering monument to my success. I had everything a man was supposed to desire. Yet every morning as the relentless African sun bled over the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues that should have inspired me, I felt nothing but a crushing, sterile emptiness. The root of this emptiness, or at least the most immediate and painful symptom, was my marriage. Zola. My wife. She was beautiful, yes, in a way that photographs beautifully and commands attention at gala dinners. She was high society royalty, the daughter of a former minister, and she wore her status like a second skin. Our marriage, which had now stretched into its 15th year, was less a partnership of two souls and more a strategic merger of two powerful families. We hadn't truly connected in years. Our dialogue was transactional, discussing the next charity ball, the maintenance of her imported luxury car, or the exorbitant school fees for our son, Simphiwe, who was away at a prestigious boarding school in the UK. Zola's world was defined by conspicuous consumption. Her wardrobe was an inventory of international designers, her social calendar a blur of exclusive parties and foreign holidays. She spoke more often of the state of her latest Louis Vuitton handbag than she did of the state of my company, or indeed, my heart. Her indifference wasn't aggressive, it was worse. It was a soft, calculated apathy, the kind that whispers to a man that he is ultimately replaceable, nothing more than the source of the immense wealth that fuels her lifestyle. She had hired and fired a string of household staff, cooks, drivers, security, and especially maids, with a ruthless efficiency that bordered on the cruel. They were ghosts to her, temporary fixtures, and she never remembered their names. This indifference to the people below her was one of the things that had begun to chafe at my soul, a wealthy man's guilt that I could no longer ignore. One sweltering Thursday morning, I was downstairs by 6 a.m. in the custom-built gym, pounding away on the treadmill, trying to outrun the demons of my own making. Zola was, naturally, still asleep. I was finalizing a complex deal to acquire a large tract of land outside Pretoria, a negotiation that had kept me on edge for weeks. The tension in my shoulders felt like concrete. I stopped the machine and stepped off, grabbing a towel. That's when I saw her. A new maid. She wasn't one of the sleek, uniformed figures Zola usually favored. This woman was small, perhaps in her mid-30s, dressed in a simple, faded blue uniform. Her hair was neatly braided and pulled back. She was on her knees in the expansive marble foyer, not with a fancy imported mop, but with a cloth, diligently polishing the base of the grand staircase, which Zola insisted must shine like a mirror. What drew my attention wasn't her work, which was impeccable, but the faint sound that accompanied it. She was humming. It wasn't a modern pop song or a radio jingle. It was an old Zulu ngoma, a song of the field, a melody rooted deep in the earth, something my own grandmother used to sing back in the village near Newcastle before we moved to the city. It was a sound I hadn't heard in 30 years, a lullaby of resilience and homecoming. I paused, towel draped over my shoulder, watching her. Her movements were economical, respectful of the space, but there was a quiet dignity about her posture. She wasn't rushing, she was simply doing the work. I cleared my throat. "Sani bona," I said, using the formal Zulu greeting. "Hello." She startled, dropping her rag momentarily. She quickly stood up, hands clasped nervously in front of her. Her eyes, a deep, warm brown, flickered up to mine, but immediately dropped in the expected gesture of deference. "Good morning, Nkosi," she replied, her voice soft, with the clear, unhurried cadence of someone who hadn't forgotten the language of the rural heartlands. "You are new here," I stated, walking closer. "Yes, Nkosi. I started this week. My name is Nomusa." She pronounced it carefully, Nomusa. "Grace." "Nomusa," I repeated, the name tasting strangely genuine on my tongue after years of pronouncing high society names and corporate acronyms. "Where are you from, Nomusa? Your accent, it reminds me of home." She lifted her eyes again, and this time she held my gaze for a second longer. There was a flicker of surprise, a hint of something resembling kinship, before she remembered her place. "KwaZulu-Natal, Nkosi. A show area," she said. "I came to Joburg to find work. I have 2 children back home with my mother." 2 children. A show. The weight of her sacrifice, the sheer distance she had traveled for this minimal wage, suddenly felt heavy in the air. Zola would never know this woman's story, nor would she care. I, the man who moved millions in property, felt a sudden, sharp pang of connection to this woman polishing my marble. It was a connection born from a shared geography, a mutual memory of the dust and the heat and the sound of that beautiful humming song. "That song you were humming?" I said a little too quickly. "My gogo used to sing it. It's a good song." Nomusa's face softened. A genuine, unguarded smile touched her lips, transforming her reserved features. "It is an old song, Nkosi. It reminds me that even when the body is tired, the spirit must remain strong. It is the song of the women." In that moment, standing there in my expensive athletic gear, surrounded by the cold, flawless evidence of my enormous wealth, I felt a deep, profound shame. My spirit was anything but strong. It was withered, suffocated by the very things I had chased and caught. You work well, Nomusa," I managed, feeling awkward in the sudden, deep silence. It was the longest non-business conversation I had had with anyone in my own home in months. "Keep it up." I turned, heading for the kitchen to get my usual pre-market coffee, trying to shake the feeling that I had just stumbled upon a piece of my own lost soul. The next day and the day after, the pattern repeated. I would seek out the sound of her humming. Not deliberately, perhaps, but subconsciously. I would find an excuse to be in the area she was cleaning. I noticed details. The meticulous way she folded the towels, the small, perfectly shaped flowers she managed to create from the toilet paper roll in the guest bath. A detail Zola's former maids never bothered with. It was artistry in servitude. One afternoon I was working from my home office, reviewing the sensitive land acquisition file. The tension was immense. A rival firm was trying to sabotage the deal. I needed absolute focus, yet my mind kept drifting. I walked out onto the balcony overlooking the pool. Nomusa was there cleaning the glass pool barrier. She had her back to me. When she was done with a section of glass, she pressed her forehead lightly against the clean pane for a moment, a small gesture of silent exhaustion or perhaps gratitude for the finished task. I watched her, a knot tightening in my chest. This woman was giving her entire life force to maintain the pristine facade of my empty existence. I walked back into the office, picked up the phone, and called my PA. "Tabo, I need you to find out everything about the new maid Nomusa. Her full name, where she lives when she's not here, her family situation. Do it quietly. No one, especially not Zola, is to know," I asked. The order felt wrong, a violation of her privacy, but the urge to understand her silent, dignified life was overwhelming. I felt like a man in a desert who had just spotted a single, distant oasis. Days later, Tabo's discreet file landed on my desk. Nomusa Grace Mackay's. Widowed 2 years ago. Her husband, a miner, died in a shaft collapse near Carltonville. The mining company had denied negligence, leaving her with no significant payout. She was sending nearly all her meager wages back to her mother in Esho to care for her 8 and 10-year-old children. She slept on a foam mattress in the staff quarters, often working 12 hours a day. Resilience wasn't a song for Nomusa, it was her only option. Reading the stark, brutal facts of her life, I felt the glass cage of my own world shatter around me. Here was a woman who had suffered loss that would cripple most men, yet she still possessed the capacity to hum a song of strength. I, the powerful Nkosi, had nothing to fear but my own boredom, yet my heart felt heavier than her entire burden. That evening Zola and I were at a dull dinner party. She was holding court, discussing her latest trip to Milan, her laughter high and brittle. I looked at her perfectly manicured hand, draped possessively over my arm, and felt absolutely nothing. I couldn't shake the image of Nomusa pressing her tired forehead against the clean glass. I returned home late, the house silent. I walked past the staff quarters, pausing outside the window of the room Nomusa shared. A faint light was visible under the door. I knew she was inside. I didn't knock. I just stood there, the cool night air of Sandhurst wrapping around me, the smell of jasmine and expensive perfume filling my senses. I looked up at the moon, which was just a sliver above the towering walls of my property. I had built an empire. I had commanded armies of workers. But tonight, I knew this fundamental truth. I was married to a masterpiece of cold self-interest, and I was falling for a woman whose only wealth was her humility and the melody of her spirit. This was not a flirtation. This was a realization that my life, the one I had constructed with such ruthless ambition, was a lie. I walked back into the silent mansion. I went to the safe in my study. I took out my official will and my marriage certificate. I stared at the 2 documents, feeling the cold, hard weight of a decision that would redefine not only my life, but the fate of my entire empire and everyone in it. I knew what I had to do. I had to choose life even if it meant destroying everything I was. I just needed one more conversation, one final, definitive moment to know for sure. The next morning, I intercepted Nomusa in the pantry where she was stacking fine china. "Nomusa," I said, my voice low and serious. She turned, her usual deference immediately present. "Nkosi? I need you to come to my office later this afternoon. My private office in the city. Not here. I have a business proposition for you." I handed her a small, discreet piece of paper with the address. She looked at the paper, then at me, confusion replacing the usual professional politeness in her eyes. "A proposition, Nkosi? I don't understand." "You don't need to understand now," I said, my gaze steady. "Just trust me. It is important. It is about your future. And perhaps, about mine." I walked away without waiting for her reply, the paper burning lightly in her hand. The moment I shut the door, I felt the adrenaline surge. I was about to risk everything. My company, my reputation, my marriage, my son's inheritance, for a woman who cleans my floors. It was mad. It was reckless. It was the most alive I had felt in decades. What would I say to her? What business proposition could I possibly offer the woman I was falling in love with? And more terrifyingly, what would Zola do when she found out? Her family was ruthless and her lawyers were sharks. I was putting a target on my back. But the decision was made. I was going to secure Nomusa's future, even if it meant sacrificing my own. The drive from my Sandhurst mansion to the towering Nkosi Holdings headquarters in the financial district felt less like a commute and more like the passage to a different life. The air conditioning in my custom Mercedes Maybach was set to icy, but I was sweating. My driver, a quiet man named Vuyo, navigated the morning traffic, blissfully unaware that the man he was chauffeuring was plotting the self-destruction of his entire gilded existence. I kept running over the facts in my mind, trying to rationalize the situation with the cold, hard logic that had built my empire. Nkosi Holdings was an intricate machine, running on contracts, projections, and ruthless efficiency. My personal life was supposed to be a stable foundation, not a fault line threatening to split the whole structure. But I was tired of the structure. I was tired of the cold marble, the imported art, the wife who treated me like a particularly efficient ATM. I was starving for something real. When I arrived at the office, the usual hubbub of the financial world was a distant hum. My private office was a sanctuary of dark wood, leather, and panoramic views of the city. I dismissed Thabo, my PA, telling him I needed no interruptions for the rest of the day, not even for Zola should she call. Then I waited. Every minute felt like an hour. Would Nomusa actually come? She was a woman of routine, responsibility, and deep respect for the established hierarchy. To walk out of my home during her working hours and travel across the city to a CEO's office, a place she had no business being, was an enormous step, an act of sheer audacity for someone in her position. It required courage that Zola, cushioned by wealth, had never needed to possess. Exactly at 3 p.m. Thabo knocked, discreetly clearing his throat. "Nkosi, the visitor is here. Nomusa Makai's. Send her in immediately, Thabo. And hold all calls, please." When Nomusa walked through the massive heavy double doors of my office, she looked like a small lost bird that had accidentally flown into a cathedral. She was still wearing the simple blue uniform, neatly pressed, but now slightly rumpled from the taxi ride. She clutched a worn, cheap handbag, and the small piece of paper with my address was tucked into the pocket of her dress. Her eyes, usually downcast, scanned the expansive room, the 12-seater boardroom table, the priceless African sculptures, the view that made one feel like a god looking down on humanity. There was no envy in her gaze, only a quiet awe, perhaps even a gentle pity for the sheer scale of the loneliness this wealth implied. "Sanibona Nkosi," she whispered, standing stiffly just inside the door, her hands clasped. "Nomusa, come in. Please close the door. Sit down." I indicated the plush leather armchair across from my desk. She hesitated, then obediently closed the door. She didn't sit in the armchair. Instead, she perched cautiously on the edge of the smaller, less imposing visitor's chair usually reserved for brief, inconsequential meetings. It was a clear, unspoken statement. She knew her place. I walked around the desk and sat in the chair next to her, deliberately avoiding the powerful barrier of my CEO's desk. I leaned forward, my hands resting on my knees, trying to convey sincerity and respect, the opposite of the corporate demeanor I wore all day. "Nomusa, thank you for coming. I know this is unusual. It's important that we speak frankly, without the presence of the house, without Zola." She nodded, her brow furrowed in apprehension. "Nkosi, I left a note with the cook. I asked for permission to run an errand for a few hours. I don't want to be dishonest. I am worried I will lose my job. The fear in her voice was palpable. The loss of this job, minimal as the pay was, meant absolute disaster for her children. It was a crushing reality check. My reckless love was her potential destitution. You won't lose your job, Nomusa. Not unless you choose to. That is why you are here. I took a deep breath. I had rehearsed this opening 100 times, and yet the words felt inadequate. I needed to offer her something genuine, something that spoke to her resilience and the strength I admired. I would start with the business proposition. I had to. I read your file, Nomusa. I know about your late husband, the mining tragedy, and your current situation. I know you are sending money home to Esho to care for your children and your mother. She visibly flinched at the intrusion into her private grief, but she held my gaze. It is true, Nkosi. But I did not come here to ask for anything. I just want to work. I know, and I respect that. But you are a woman of remarkable strength. I see it in your work, in the way you carry yourself, in your songs. You shouldn't be scrubbing floors. You should be building a future for your children, something permanent. I leaned closer. Nomusa, my company, Nkosi Holdings, has a foundation, a corporate social responsibility arm. We look for community projects, investments that empower resilient individuals. I want to invest in you. Specifically, I want to help you start a business. Her eyes widened, suddenly losing the apprehension and filling with pure astonishment. A business, Nkosi? I don't know anything about business. I am a cleaner. You know about hard work. You know about detail. You know about commitment. That is 90% of business. Tabo's file mentioned that your mother is an excellent seamstress. She used to make traditional attire, ama shweshwe, for the community. A small, hopeful spark ignited in her eyes. Yes, she is. The best in Esho. But there is no market there anymore. Not enough people can afford her designs. But there is a market here, Nomusa. In Joburg. Tourists, high-end clients looking for authentic, beautifully made garments, not the factory-made rubbish. We will set up a small operation here. We will call it Nomusa's Legacy. Your mother can train others, you can handle the logistics and the accounts, and we will market it to high-end boutiques and the tourism industry. The foundation will provide the seed capital, the space, and the legal framework. You will run it. You will own it. I laid out a simple 2-page contract. This contract guarantees a significant investment, enough to buy equipment, rent a small workshop in Soweto, and hire staff. It gives you a living wage immediately and the majority ownership. All you have to do is sign. This is not a loan, Nomusa. It is an investment in a resilient African woman and her family legacy. She didn't reach for the paper. She just stared at me, the powerful CEO, offering her a lifeline that could change her children's lives forever. Her eyes began to glisten with unshed tears. Nkosi, why? Why me? You have hundreds of employees. Thousands of people in need. Why take such an interest in your maid? Her voice trembled, cracking with emotion. This was the moment. The corporate facade I had so carefully constructed crumbled. I could have hidden behind the foundation's philanthropy, kept it clean, kept it safe. But I couldn't. Not with her looking at me with such raw honesty. I reached out, my hand hovering for a second, then resting gently on her arm. It was a breach of protocol, of hierarchy, of every social rule in our rigid, class-divided city. I am investing in you, Nomusa, because you are the only real thing I have encountered in years. Everything in my life is polished, cold, and fake. My marriage is a contract. My friends are business partners. My home is a museum. But you sing a song of strength even when you are on your knees. When you hum that ingoma, I feel the dust of my own village, and for a moment, I am the boy I used to be, not this tired, lonely billionaire. I squeezed her arm lightly. The business is real. The contract is real. But Nomusa, the reason is also real. I have fallen in love with your spirit. I am in love with the woman who cleans my floors, who reminds me of what I lost when I chased this empty empire. The words hung in the air, heavy and irreversible. Her face was a landscape of shock, terror, and a fragile, burgeoning hope. She snatched her arm back, not in disgust, but in fear of the immense, dangerous weight of my confession. Nkosi, please. You cannot say such things. You are a married man. You are Dumisani Nkosi. I am your maid. If your wife, if anyone knew, it would destroy me. It would destroy my future. Please just give me the business. That is enough. This is too dangerous. She scrambled to her feet, knocking the chair slightly off balance. I know the danger, Nomusa. I know the cost. And I am willing to pay it. I stood up too, meeting her urgent, terrified gaze. I'm already planning to divorce Zola. Not for you initially, but for my own soul. I cannot live that lie anymore. But now, knowing you, I want to divorce her for the chance to build a true life. A life with warmth, with song, with purpose. A life with you. I gestured to the contract. Sign that paper first, Nomusa. Secure your family. It is the honorable thing to do. Take the investment, build your business, and when you are safe, when you are strong, you can decide if you want to consider the impossible. Don't answer me now. Just tell me you will take the business and the security. Nomusa looked from the contract to my face, then out the window at the sprawling, indifferent city below. She was being offered everything and threatened with ruin in the same breath. She signed, she accepted my help. If she accepted my help, she accepted a bond that Zola would surely interpret as betrayal, regardless of my intentions. I cannot accept this without knowing the risk, Nkosi. You say you will divorce your wife. But what if you change your mind? What if she finds out before you leave her? She is a very powerful woman, Nkosi. She will not just fire me. She will ruin me. She will ensure I can never work in this city again. Her voice was barely a whisper. I walked over to the corner of the office and opened a hidden panel in the wall, revealing a small, steel safe. I quickly entered the code. When I turned back, I wasn't holding a business contract. I was holding a small brown leather box. Nomusa, look at me, I commanded, my voice firm and serious. I am not offering you a fling. I am not offering you a mistress's life. I am offering you a new beginning for both of us. I opened the box, revealing a simple, traditional gold ring, beautifully crafted in a way that spoke of ancestry, not ostentation. I have already consulted my lawyer. The divorce proceedings begin next week. This is what I was going to give Zola when I asked her to marry me years ago, but she insisted on a bigger, diamond-crusted thing. I kept this one. It is my mother's. This is my true promise, Nomusa. Take this ring, take the contract, and be safe. I will protect you. I will end my marriage. I am ready to lose everything for the chance to be the man your songs describe. Nomusa took 2 steps back, shaking her head slowly, tears now streaming silently down her face. She was trapped between the brutal necessity of securing her children's future and the terrifying, magnificent proposal of the city's most powerful man. Nkosi, if I take the contract, I secure my children. If I take the ring, I secure my heart. I cannot do both without signing my own death warrant. You must choose for me. Which is the real offer? The safe business or the dangerous love? As the heavy silence descended, a loud, insistent buzzing started from the phone on my corporate desk. It was Zola. Her name flashed urgently on the screen. Dumisani knew if he answered now, it would be too late to hide the truth. Nomusa watched him, waiting for the choice. The insistent buzz of the private line, Zola's number, was a jarring, intrusive sound that ripped through the fragile sanctity of my confession. It was the sound of my old life asserting its terrifying, opulent power. For a fraction of a second, I wavered, the reflex to answer the powerful voice of my wife fighting against the profound vulnerability I had just exposed to Nomusa. Nomusa watched me, her gaze an agonizing mix of pleading and dread. Her silence was louder than the phone's insistent demand. I looked at the phone, then back at the small, courageous woman standing before me. I made my choice, the first truly selfish and honest choice I had made in 15 years. I reached out and slammed my palm down on the console, silencing the phone. I didn't just reject the call, I metaphorically slammed the door on Zola and the world she represented. Nomusa, I said, my voice low and steady, pulling her focus back to the small ancestral ring box in my hand. The offer is one. The business proposal is a safeguard, a way to lift you out of the vulnerability that a woman like Zola preys on. The ring is the truth. I am offering you my name, my commitment, and my life once I am free. I placed the simple gold ring box, which held the heart of my family's tradition, on the table between us, next to the contract. It was a clear delineation of the 2 paths, secure independence or utter transformation. I am not asking you to give me an answer today about the ring. But the business, the seed investment, the legacy for your children, that must be secured now. I will not allow you to remain at the mercy of my household, where you are vulnerable to Zola's malice, which is inevitable once she suspects anything. I pushed the contract closer to her. This paper guarantees your independence. It gives you an income far beyond what you earn now, a workshop, and a legitimate reason to be away from the Sandhurst house. It is protection. Sign it, Nomusa. Sign it for your children. The mention of her children, the entire reason she endured the hardship of my house, was the key. She looked at the contract, the pen, and then at the ring box, which shimmered faintly in the afternoon light. The battle playing out on her face was heartbreaking. Fear warring with hope, necessity triumphing over prudence. Finally she exhaled, a shaky, audible sigh. She picked up the pen, her hand trembling. She didn't read the contract. She trusted my word, which in our world was almost as dangerous as trusting my heart. She signed her name, Nomusa Grace Mackay's, in neat, careful script. I felt a surge of triumph but also a deep sense of responsibility. I had just taken her first step toward a new life, and now I had to make sure the floor didn't collapse beneath her. Excellent, I said, picking up the document. Tabo will finalize the legal work tonight. Effective tomorrow, you are no longer the maid. You are the managing partner of Nomusa's legacy. I walked back to my desk and picked up the phone. I called the Sandhurst house directly, overriding Zola's blocked line. The head of household, Mr. Mzizi, answered. Mzizi, it's Dumisani. Effective immediately, Nomusa Mackay's is transferred from her duties as household staff. She is now an employee of Nkosi Holdings, Special Project Development. She will report to the office tomorrow morning, not the house. Have her belongings moved to the city apartment we keep for staff, and arrange for her transportation. She is on executive terms, Mzizi. Make it happen quietly. I hung up before he could question the extraordinary, abrupt transfer. It was done. Nomusa was out of Zola's immediate reach. I turned back to Nomusa, who was still standing, her eyes wide with shock. You are safe, Nomusa. You have security. Now let's talk about the ring. She shook her head vigorously. Nkosi, no. Not yet. I'm grateful for the business, truly. It is a miracle for my children. But the ring, it is too fast. You must settle your affairs. You must separate from your wife honorably. I will not be the reason for your downfall or the cause of a messy scandal. I will run my business and I will wait for you to be free. Then and only then, if you still want me, we can talk about the ring. Her answer was principled, firm, and deeply African in its respect for process and order. It reaffirmed everything I admired about her. She wasn't chasing my money or my status. She was preserving her own dignity. Understood, Nomusa. It is an honorable path. I will start the legal separation process tomorrow morning. You focus on your business. I will contact you only through my private line to check on your progress. We must be discreet. Zola is connected and she is ruthless. Just as I finished the sentence, the door of my office burst open without a knock. It wasn't Tabo. It was Zola. She stood framed in the doorway, a vision of Sandhurst fury, immaculate designer dress, hair perfectly styled, but her eyes blazing with an ice-cold rage that could strip paint off steel. She must have called my office, been blocked, and driven straight here, sensing the shift in my energy during our brief, silent confrontation on the phone. Dumisani. How dare you ignore my call? I was trying to tell you that the caterers for the charity gala changed the menu again. She spat, striding into the room. Then she saw Nomusa. Nomusa, standing near my chair in her faded maid's uniform, clutching a cheap handbag, looking terrified. Zola stopped dead, her eyes narrowing to slits as she surveyed the scene. Her husband, the CEO, sitting near the maid, the ancestral ring box sitting innocently between them on the coffee table, and the palpable tension that crackled in the air. What in God's name is she doing here? Zola asked, her voice dropping to a dangerous, silky whisper. She didn't even remember Nomusa's name. And why are you wearing that hideous uniform in my husband's private office? What did you steal this time, you tramp? Nomusa shrank back, instinctively raising her hands in a gesture of defense and denial. Nkosi, I haven't stolen anything. Then Nkosi called me here for a job transfer to the foundation? Zola's harsh, brittle laugh cut her off. A job transfer? You transfer to a corporate foundation? Don't insult my intelligence, you pathetic rural girl. Dumisani, you bring this peasant into your office, the same office where you sign multi-billion rand deals? You silence my call for this? Zola advanced, her perfectly pedicured foot nearly kicking the table. She looked down at the ring box and then her eyes landed on the contract lying next to it, Nomusa's name clear at the top, my signature below it. The sight of the ancestral ring box, the ring she had scorned years ago, next to an official Nkosi Holdings contract with the maid's name, was the final, devastating piece of the puzzle for her. The ring, Zola gasped, her composure finally breaking into a raw, ugly scream. That is my mother-in-law's ring. You kept it? And you were going to give it to her? And a foundation contract to hide your disgusting little affair. She moved like lightning, reaching down and snatching the contract from the table. She didn't read it. She tore it violently into tiny, fluttering pieces, scattering the fragments of Nomusa's future onto the polished floor. You are fired. Get out of here. I will have you arrested for trespass and theft. Get out of my sight before I call security and have them throw you off the 30th floor. I stood up, pushing the chair back, finally breaking my silence, my voice booming with a cold, absolute authority that made even Zola momentarily step back. Stop, Zola. She is not fired and you will not touch her. Nomusa, leave now. Go to the staff apartment. Mzizi has the instructions. Go. Nomusa, tears streaming down her face, didn't hesitate. She fled, running out of the office and into the corridor, leaving behind the shattered pieces of the contract and the untouched ancestral ring box. Zola turned back to me, her chest heaving, the beautiful mask of her composure permanently fractured. You chose her. The dirt beneath our feet. You threw away 15 years of marriage, my loyalty, and your family's dignity for a maid. Do you know what my father will do to you? Do you understand the clauses in our prenuptial agreement, Dumisani? I will take you for everything. I will dismantle Nkosi Holdings piece by piece, until you are cleaning floors next to her. I walked over to the windows looking out over my city. I felt strangely calm. The shouting, the destruction, it was all noise, the death rattle of a relationship that had died years ago. You don't understand, Zola. You never did. This isn't about an affair. This is about choosing life over luxury. And as for your prenup, I turned, the calmness of my voice chilling in contrast to her hysteria. I consulted my lawyers months ago. I know the clauses. And I have taken measures you cannot possibly comprehend. I reached into the inner pocket of my tailored suit jacket, pulling out a sealed envelope. I tossed it onto my desk. That is a complete set of documents, Zola. It contains the official divorce papers, which my lawyers are filing first thing tomorrow. It also contains the financial records of the Nkosi Holdings Charitable Foundation, including a fully funded endowment of 50 million rand, secured and legally irrevocable, set up 2 days ago. That foundation's sole mandate is to support small businesses owned by single mothers from rural KwaZulu-Natal. I transferred the funds and signed the mandate before the prenuptial agreement was activated. Zola stared at the envelope, her face pale, the magnitude of my action finally dawning on her. 50 million rand, a massive sum, gone, out of our joint assets and legally tied up to help women exactly like Nomusa. My declaration of independence was not a cheap, tawdry gesture. It was a devastatingly calculated financial strike. You did this to spite me? She whispered, clutching her chest. No, Zola. I did this to ensure that even if you take every cent of the rest of my personal fortune, the good that should have come from this wealth, the legacy that speaks to my roots, is protected. You can destroy my present, but you cannot destroy my future or my honor. I walked toward the door, intending to leave her in the wreckage she had caused. Wait, she shrieked, her voice suddenly desperate. The papers? What about Simphiwe? Our son? What did you write about his custody? I will never let you take him to be raised by a peasant woman. I paused, my hand on the doorknob. Simphiwe. The only pure thing left of our marriage. I turned, my heart heavy with the impossible choices of a father. Simphiwe is 18, Zola. He is a man under the law. And I haven't spoken to him about this yet. But he is coming home from the UK for his gap year in 2 weeks. When he lands, he will find out what his father has done, and what his mother has become. He will choose where he stays, Zola. And that, in the end, will be the true test of this entire mess. I left the office, shutting the door behind me, leaving Zola alone with the shredded contract and the truth. But as I walked toward the elevator, a cold dread replaced my adrenaline. I had protected Nomusa financially, but Zola had seen the ring box and the contract. The financial strike had only fueled her revenge. Nomusa's physical safety was still at risk, and Zola, wounded and cornered, was about to find out exactly where her former maid was hiding. As Dumisani drove away, leaving his shattered empire behind, Zola made a furious call on her diamond-studded phone, not to her father or her lawyer, but to a shadowy figure, promising unimaginable wealth in exchange for a single dark favor: finding and silencing the peasant woman who dared to threaten her throne. The city lights of Johannesburg, usually a source of pride and power, seemed to mock me as Vuyo drove me away from the Nkosi Holdings tower. Each passing skyscraper was a reminder of the wealth I had just actively set about destroying. The silence in the Maybach was heavy, but it was a relief after Zola's hysterical storm. I felt cleansed but also dangerously exposed. My first thought was Nomusa. I had transferred her to a modest, secure apartment complex owned by Nkosi Holdings, typically reserved for mid-level managers. It was in a respectable suburb closer to the city center, far safer than the staff quarters in Sandhurst, but it was still connected to my name. I reached for my private, encrypted satellite phone, a device I usually reserved for highly sensitive deals or national security briefings. I called the apartment's number directly. Nomusa answered on the second ring, her voice tight with panic. Nkosi? Are you all right? I'm so sorry about Nkosikazi Zola. She was so angry. I saw her tear up the contract. My children's future. It's gone. Her voice was laced with frantic worry. Nomusa, listen to me. Breathe, I commanded, trying to project calm. The physical contract is just paper. The funds are legally transferred and secure. Zola's tantrum only destroyed the document, not the transaction. You are the owner of Nomusa's legacy, and the endowment is untouchable. You are safe financially. Do you understand? A shaky sigh of relief traveled through the line. Oh Nkosi, may God bless you. I was so afraid. You are in the apartment now? Is it secure? Yes Nkosi. It's small but clean. I just arrived. Mr. Mzizi sent a security guard to drop me in my bags. He was very professional. He gave me the keys and left. Good. Now listen carefully. Zola is not rational. She is wounded. She will not use the police or the courts yet. She will use fear. She will send people. Do not open that door for anyone. Not even if they claim to be from the company or the police. You are on paid leave for the next 2 weeks to organize your business. Do not step outside. I will arrange for supplies to be delivered by a third party, completely unconnected to Nkosi Holdings. Is there a fire escape or a second exit? Yes, in the kitchen. But Nkosi, I can't hide like a criminal. I must start my business. My mother and children are expecting good news. You will start your business, Nomusa. But first, you must survive Zola's initial rage. Give me 3 days. 3 days to file the divorce papers and secure the first restraining order. After that, we can talk about the workshop. Before she could protest further, I heard a sharp, unexpected noise on her end of the line. A light tapping, almost imperceptible. What was that, Nomusa? Nothing, Nkosi. Maybe the water pipes. Nomusa, are you absolutely certain you locked the door properly? Check every window. Check the fire exit. My corporate paranoia, which had saved me millions over the years, was screaming a warning. Yes, Nkosi. Everything is locked. I will be fine. Please focus on yourself. You need a good lawyer. We ended the call, but my heart was hammering against my ribs. I couldn't shake the suspicion that the tapping was something more sinister. Zola had found Nomusa faster than I thought possible. She had access to security records, and her network of informants in Johannesburg's underbelly was vast and frighteningly efficient. The high society queen sometimes played a very dirty game. Vio bypassed the usual route. Take us to my private residence in Houghton, I commanded. It was a smaller, older property, not the Sandhurst Palace. I used it for private meetings and quiet solitude. It was secure with its own internal security team, disconnected from the main household staff. As Vio accelerated onto the highway, I called my head of security, an imposing former police commissioner named Captain Mavuso. Mavuso, I have an extremely sensitive, off-the-books assignment. I need 2 of your most discreet, reliable men. I need them to go immediately to the Nkosi Holdings apartment complex on Rivonia Street. Unit 4B. Their mission is surveillance and immediate protection. There is a young woman there, Nomusa Makais, who is in acute danger. No uniform, no company identification. They are to observe and protect her from anyone who approaches the apartment, regardless of who they claim to be. If they see trouble, they use their discretion, but the woman must remain unharmed. I want confirmation of their arrival in 30 minutes. Mavuso, who had seen enough of the dark side of corporate Johannesburg to not question a bizarre order, simply said, "Consider it done, Nkosi." I leaned back against the leather seat, the tension momentarily easing. Mavuso's men were shadows, invisible protectors. As Vio pulled up to the Houghton house, I had one final urgent call to make. My son, Simphiwe. He was the center of my universe, the heir to the Nkosi legacy. He was supposed to be completely insulated from this domestic war. I tried his cell number. No answer. Time difference. He was probably asleep in his London dormitory. I left a short, careful voicemail. Simphiwe, my son. This is Baba. Listen, things are changing here. Your mother and I are separating. I know this is a shock. Please do not panic. Your inheritance is secure and my love for you is absolute. I will explain everything when you land in 2 weeks. Until then, stay focused on your studies and do not let your mother's calls distract you. I love you, my boy. As I stepped out of the car, Captain Mavuso's text came through. Team 1 in position, Nkosi. Rivonia 4B secure. Observing. Good. Nomusa was protected for now. But I had to take the offensive. I spent the next 48 hours in the Houghton house, working with my legal team. I had retained Mr. Langa, known as the Silver Fox, the most ruthless, discreet divorce lawyer in South Africa. He was expensive, but he was a surgeon, not a butcher. Mr. Langa pored over the prenuptial agreement, which Zola's family had insisted upon. The clauses were indeed brutal. If I committed adultery, I would lose the majority of my personal liquid assets, and Zola would gain a controlling interest in my share of Nkosi holdings. This was Zola's ultimate weapon. She knew my confession in the office was enough for her to claim emotional adultery, if not physical. Nkosi, Langa said, holding up the prenup, his face grim. Zola has enough leverage with your emotional declaration and that unfortunate incident in your office to cripple you financially and destroy your corporate control. We need a clean exit. No messy counter-accusations. We must act with surgical precision. What is the strategy, Langa? I need to protect the company and ensure Nomusa's safety is paramount. The strategy is to claim irretrievable breakdown, mutual separation, and concede the Sandhurst house and a significant lump sum immediately. We make the immediate financial pain immense but targeted, to remove her motive for war. We then file a simultaneous restraining order, based on the documented threats she made in your office, ensuring she cannot come within 500 meters of you or Nomusa Makai's, whom we will list as a key corporate employee under threat. I agreed. It was a concession of immense capital, but it protected the ultimate prize, the controlling shares of the company and my future with Nomusa. On the third morning, Langa executed the plan. The papers were filed. Zola was served at the Sandhurst mansion, along with the order transferring the house and the financial settlement. She was now a very wealthy, very single woman, but she was cut off from Nkosi holdings and forbidden to approach Nomusa. I felt a surge of freedom, until my private phone rang. It wasn't Mavuso. It was an anonymous burner phone number. I answered warily. Hello. The voice on the other end was a low, synthesized whisper, clearly distorted to hide the speaker's identity. But the message was terrifyingly clear. Mr. Nkosi, we have located your new corporate employee. Rivonia Street, Unit 4B. The woman Nomusa Makai's. Your wife made a significant offer to locate her, and we always deliver. She is alone, and the house security outside is easily neutralized. We are going in now. You have 3 minutes to make the correct transfer, or the woman who cleans your floors will be cleaning the streets of Joburg in a bag. Who is this? I roared, jumping to my feet, the blood draining from my face. A cleaner. Just like your beautiful maid. A problem cleaner. You can save her life for 10 million rand. Transfer it now to the cryptocurrency wallet I will text you. Fail and you lose your future. I looked at the number Langa had just given me for the emergency divorce fund. It was exactly 10 million rand, set aside for unexpected legal fees. I knew this was Zola's doing. She had activated the shadows. The restraining order had only enraged her, pushing her to the darkest, most dangerous solution. I didn't hesitate. Nomusa's life was worth more than every cent I owned. The wallet address. Send it. Now, I choked out, already logging into my secure financial terminal. A text immediately flashed onto the screen with a lengthy, cryptic string of characters. A crypto wallet address. I executed the transfer in less than 60 seconds. The money was gone, untraceable, into the abyss. The transfer is complete. I yelled into the phone, sweat dripping onto the desk. She is safe. You let her go. The synthesized voice chuckled, a cold, grating sound. The money is confirmed, Mr. Nkosi. You are a fast learner. Now, a message for the little maid. Tell her to stay away from the CEO. This was the warning. The next time there will be no negotiation. And Mr. Nkosi, one final thing. Check the news. The line went dead. I immediately called Captain Mavuso. He answered on the first ring. Mavuso, I need a status update on Unit 4B now. Nkosi, we are on high alert. We saw 2 unmarked vehicles, heavy security, approach the apartment complex perimeter. They stalled when they saw my men. We held our position, and they retreated after a moment of intense standoff. Nomusa is safe. But, Mavuso hesitated. But what, Mavuso? Tell me. Nkosi, the men retreated because the media arrived. A full crew. They are surrounding the complex. It appears someone tipped them off. They are shouting questions about you, about a mistress, and about a corporate scandal. The divorce is already on the news. I switched on the television in my office. Every major news network in South Africa, SABC and even CNN Africa, was running the headline, complete with Maid and Zola's photos. Billionaire CEO divorces wife, scandal involving Maid Sheikh's Nkosi empire. Zola hadn't just attacked Nomusa, she had simultaneously launched a nuclear public relations strike against me. She had exposed everything, making the lie impossible to contain. The money was the cost of Nomusa's life, the headlines were the cost of my freedom. I looked at the television, then at the empty crypto wallet, and finally at the ring box I kept locked in my safe. I had won the battle for Nomusa's life, but I had lost the war for my reputation, and now my entire relationship with my son was in the balance. 2 weeks later, Simphiwe's flight touched down at Ortambo International. He ignored my calls. When he finally called home, it wasn't me he demanded to speak to. He demanded to know why his father had ruined his mother's life and embarrassed his entire family on the front pages of the world's newspapers. Dumisani realized that the true price of his freedom had just walked off the plane, and his loyalty was far from certain. Chapter 5. The moment Simphiwe's voice came through the secure line, not from his cell but from Zola's heavily filtered voice line, I knew the battle for my son had already begun and I was losing. His tone was cold, accusatory, and utterly devoid of the warmth he usually reserved for me. Baba, he started, the use of the formal term of respect stinging me more than any curse. I am at the Sandhurst house. I saw the news. I saw the headlines. What have you done to Mama? And who is this woman the papers are calling your mistress? I gripped the phone, standing in the quiet solitude of the Houghton residence. The silence after my divorce announcement had been deafening, filled only by the chatter of lawyers and the incessant demands of the press. Now, Simphiwe's anger was the sound of my personal reckoning. Simphiwe, listen to me. I need you to come to Houghton. We need to talk face to face. Your mother is presenting a narrative that is not the truth. There are things you don't know. Things I don't know? He challenged, his voice cracking with 18-year-old indignation. I know you abandoned your wife for a maid. I know you stripped Mama of half her assets and humiliated her in front of the entire continent. My friends in London were texting me screenshots of the headlines. The Nkosi name is a joke. How am I supposed to return to university next year with this stain on our name? His focus was entirely on reputation, on the superficial trappings of the high society life Zola had groomed him to protect. It was a mirror image of Zola's values and it chilled me to the bone. Your mother's reputation, Simphiwe, was built on a lie, just as my marriage was. I did not abandon her for a maid. I divorced her because our marriage was dead. The woman the papers are mentioning, Nomusa, is a respectable woman now a partner in one of my charitable initiatives. Your mother, in her rage, attempted to have her harmed. I paid 10 million rand, Simphiwe, to a shadowy figure to save that woman's life. I knew this was too much to unload over the phone, but the desperation to make him understand was overwhelming. 10 million rand for a maid? Simphiwe scoffed. You gave away family capital to a criminal for some tawdry affair? And you expect me to believe you haven't slept with her? Baba, I'm not a child. Mama says you've gone crazy. She says this woman is manipulating you, using some kind of traditional witchcraft to control your mind and take our money. Witchcraft. The word hit me like a physical blow. It was the oldest, cruelest smear in the African society playbook, used to undermine any woman of lower class who dared to rise above her station. Zola was not just playing dirty, she was tapping into dangerous superstitions to completely delegitimize Nomusa. Your mother is lying, Simphiwe. She is wounded and vindictive. This has nothing to do with witchcraft. It is about her inability to accept that I no longer love her, and her refusal to let go of the wealth she believes she is owed. Come to Houghton. I will show you the documents. I will show you the proof of the threats. And I will tell you about the ancestral ring your mother rejected. A heavy pause settled on the line. I could hear Zola's voice faintly in the background, whispering something urgent to him. I am staying with Mama, Simphiwe finally stated, his voice firm and final. I will not come to the Houghton house while this scandal is raging. I have to protect the Nkosi name and Mama. Until you can settle this honorably, I cannot side with you. If this Nomusa is so important, why don't you bring her here to the Sandhurst house, and prove to me she is not a mistress? His challenge was devastatingly clever and utterly impossible. Bringing Nomusa back to the Sandhurst house, Zola's lair, was a guaranteed disaster, both legally and physically. He had perfectly echoed Zola's demand for a public confrontation, but cloaked it in the guise of filial duty. That is not possible, Simphiwe. I have a court order protecting her from your mother's threats. That is how serious this is. Then you are hiding something, Baba. Until you can prove otherwise, I will not be swayed by your legal maneuvering. I am staying here. When you are ready to be the father I remember, you know where to find me. He hung up. The weight of the phone felt immense. Zola had won the first round. She had successfully weaponized our son's sense of duty and his ingrained fear of social shame. I immediately called Nomusa, who was still locked down in the corporate apartment, now guarded by Mavuso's men. Nomusa, my son is home. He is with Zola. She is feeding him lies, rumors of witchcraft, the whole playbook. He refuses to see me. Oh, Nkosi, that is the worst blow a man can face, she said, her voice full of genuine empathy, not pity. I know Zola is a difficult woman, but she is his mother. He is young and he only sees the betrayal of her. He does not see the years of your loneliness. He demanded that I bring you to Sandhurst, Nomusa, to prove that you are not my mistress. And what did you say, Nkosi? I refused. I told him about the restraining order, which only confirmed his suspicion that I am hiding something tawdry. Nomusa, I am losing him. I am losing the one person I did all this for. Nkosi, she said gently, her simple wisdom cutting through my corporate panic. A son's love cannot be bought with money or legal papers. It is won with truth. You have protected me and I am grateful. But now you must stop protecting him from the truth. You must show him, not tell him. Show him what, Nomusa? The truth is scattered, dangerous, and hard to believe. You have protected me by giving me a business. You have given me dignity. That is the truth he needs to see. I am tired of hiding, Nkosi. Zola has destroyed the contract, but she has not destroyed the money. I want to start my business now. I want to rent the workshop in Soweto. Let your son see me working, honestly building a future for my children. Let him see that I am not a witch or a predator. I am just a woman with a clean heart, making an honest living. Her suggestion was a stroke of genius. It was a risky move, taking her out of the protective cage of the city apartment and placing her in the bustling, visible environment of Soweto, but it was the only way to challenge Zola's narrative of deceit and witchcraft. Soweto, I mused. It's public, it's far from Sandhurst, and it's the heart of our community. It makes sense. It shows integrity. But it is still dangerous. Zola's shadows are everywhere. Mavuso's men can protect the workshop, Nkosi. But your son must see it, not in a news report, but through his own eyes. I will not approach him, but you must find a way to lead him to the truth. I made the decision immediately. Agreed. I will arrange for the Soweto workshop to be rented and secured. Nomusa, you will start the business immediately. You will contact your mother in Esho and begin preparing to move her and the children to Joburg. You are going to build your legacy. I spent the next 2 days executing the plan. The Soweto workshop was a small, bright space in a developing industrial area near Orlando. Mavuso hired a team of community security officers, local men with deep roots and loyalty, to protect the premises, keeping the armed company guards out of sight. I had the business legally re-registered in a completely anonymous trust, effectively decoupling it from the Nkosi name entirely, making it impervious to Zola's legal attacks. Nomusa was the sole listed director. Finally, I was ready for Simphiwe. I wrote him a letter, not an email, not a text, but a physical letter, delivered by a non-company courier to the Sandhurst house. Simphiwe, I hear your anger and I understand your loyalty to your mother. I will not bring the woman you asked about to Sandhurst, because that is her choice, not mine. I will not force you to come to the Houghton house. But if you truly want to understand why I ended my marriage, you must see the truth for yourself. I do not ask you to judge me or your mother. I only ask you to judge the truth. I have not abandoned my life for a fantasy. I have merely redirected my focus to true legacy. Visit the Nkosi Holdings charity website. Check the latest foundation initiative listed there, under Community Empowerment. This is the only conversation I will have with you until you see it. Baba. I posted the letter and waited. It was a terrifying gamble. If he chose to believe Zola, he would delete the website address and never look back. The next morning my private line rang. It was Nomusa. Nkosi, the workshop is humming. My mother is on a bus from Esho with the children. We have hired 2 young women from the community. It is beautiful. It is real. But, she paused. But what, Nomusa? Is there trouble? No. There is a young man here. He arrived this morning wearing expensive clothes, looking very out of place. He has been standing across the street for an hour just watching the workshop. He is not approaching. He looks lost. I think it might be your son. My heart seized. He had taken the bait. He had looked up the Foundation's initiative, found the address of Nomusa's legacy, and traveled all the way to Soweto alone to see the alleged mistress. Don't approach him, Nomusa. Let him watch. Let him see the truth. I drove immediately to the Soweto district, parking my car far enough away so as not to spook him. I walked to a small, dusty cafe across the street from the workshop. I ordered a tepid coffee and watched. Simphiwe was indeed there. He stood near a small spaza shop, his posture stiff, his expensive designer jacket making him stand out like a beacon. He was staring intently through the glass window of the workshop. Inside, Nomusa, dressed now in simple, clean clothes, was bent over a sewing machine, instructing a young apprentice. Beside her, an older woman, Nomusa's mother, was meticulously cutting fabric for a vibrant ama shweshwe dress. The two small children, a boy and a girl, were sitting quietly in a corner, doing homework, surrounded by bolts of colorful fabric. The scene was one of focused labor, dignity, and family, an image worlds away from Zola's narrative of witchcraft and sordid affairs. I watched Simphiwe for a long time. His initial anger seemed to melt into confusion, then a quiet, profound realization. He wasn't seeing a predatory mistress. He was seeing a resilient family building a legitimate life, funded by the stolen capital I had set aside. Finally, Simphiwe took a step toward the workshop. He didn't enter. He simply walked up to the window, placed his hand lightly on the glass, and watched his father's mistress working. Then he turned and walked quickly away, disappearing down the dusty street. He didn't see me. I drove back to Houghton waiting. An hour later my phone rang. It was Simphiwe. On his own cell phone. "Baba," he said, the respect still there, but the anger was replaced by a hesitant, wounded tone. "I went to Soweto. I saw the workshop. It is real. Yes, my son. It is real. She is real. The love that built that is real. I don't know what to think, Baba. Mama is crying. She says you are manipulating me with guilt. She says you are ruining our lives for a woman who cleans houses. I don't know who to believe. Believe your eyes, Simphiwe. And believe your heart. I am giving you space to choose. But know this, I am tired of the lies. I am going to Nomusa's workshop now. I am going to tell her that I want to publicly acknowledge her. The time for hiding is over. I am leaving this country for a week to clear my head, and when I return I am taking my company back. You have 1 week to decide if you will stand with me or with the lie." I ended the call and drove back to Soweto. I entered the workshop, the smell of fresh cotton and warm machine oil filling my senses. It was the most welcoming place I had been in years. I walked straight to Nomusa. "Nomusa, the time for discretion is over. I am leaving for a week, a necessary business trip. But when I return I am fighting Zola in public. I want you by my side. I want to publicly acknowledge our relationship, and introduce you as my future wife, once the divorce is final. Are you willing to face the fire with me?" She smiled, a genuine, strong smile that lit up the room. "Nkosi, I am a woman of the soil. Fire does not frighten me. I will stand with you." I kissed her right there in the middle of her busy workshop, a kiss of commitment, not lust. I left the next morning on the private jet, traveling to a private estate in Seychelles to finalize my strategy to counter Zola's boardroom power. The divorce had hit the company hard, and I needed to consolidate my control before she could convince the board that my relationship with Nomusa made me mentally unfit to lead. 7 days later I landed back at Joburg International. I switched on my phone. An urgent message from Captain Mavuso flashed across the screen. "Nkosi, we have a serious problem. Nomusa did not show up at the workshop today. The security detail checked the apartment. It is empty. She and her children and mother are gone. No sign of struggle. But a note was found on the kitchen table. It is for you." The message was signed, chillingly, Zola. The message from Captain Mavuso hit me like a physical punch. I stood frozen in the arrivals lounge of Joburg International, the sounds of the bustling terminal fading to a dull roar. The euphoria of my week away, a week spent solidifying my corporate defense and dreaming of a life with Nomusa, evaporated instantly. Gone. Nomusa, her children, her mother. I didn't wait for my security detail. I grabbed my briefcase and rushed to the nearest secure vehicle, calling Mavuso directly. "Mavuso, what is the meaning of this? You had men guarding the property. How could an entire family disappear without a struggle?" Mavuso's voice was gravelly with contained tension and professional embarrassment. Nkosi, we are on scene at the Rivonia apartment now. My men are clean. There was no forced entry, no struggle. It was a planned, quiet departure. The door was locked from the outside using a standard key. This was not a kidnapping, Nkosi. This was calculated. What about the note? You said there was a note signed by Zola. What did it say? I demanded, my hands shaking with a terrible mix of rage and dread. It's a handwritten note, Nkosi. On expensive, perfumed stationery. The kind Zola uses. I have a photograph of it here. One moment. I waited, my breath hitched in my throat, until the image pinged through to my secure line. I stared at the elegant, looping script of Zola's hand, the message cutting deep into my soul. Dumisani, I told you I would protect Simphiwe. The Nkosi name is not built on peasant cotton and village witchcraft. You bought your little maid's life once. You will not buy her freedom twice. She is gone. She made a choice. When you are ready to be the man and father you are supposed to be, I will allow you to see your son again. Until then, enjoy your empty workshop. Zola. The message was crushing. Zola was not claiming to have kidnapped Nomusa. She was claiming that Nomusa had chosen to leave. And she was using this to leverage control over Simphiwe. Mavuso, Nomusa would never abandon her business, her mother, and her children's future for Zola. It is impossible. She was forced. It had to be psychological or financial coercion. What did she take? Only personal effects, Nkosi. No luggage, no major items. The apartment is barren. But here is the critical detail. We searched the workshop in Soweto. It is also empty. All the new sewing machines, the bolts of fabric, the traditional patterns, all gone. It was emptied professionally in one go. It was a complete relocation, not a flight. It looks like a rival business cleaned out the entire operation. My mind raced. Zola was a master strategist, but this was too clean, too organized for mere emotional revenge. This suggested a deep, sophisticated operation, one that targeted not just Nomusa's safety, but her very dignity and means of independence. Mavuso, Nomusa's legacy was newly registered and secured. Only Nomusa and I knew the exact physical location and the inventory. Zola could have found the address, but who helped her empty the place? And where would she take a woman who needed money and security? That is the question, Nkosi. We are tracking all of Zola's assets, but they are all high-value, impossible-to-hide items, yachts, overseas properties. This is a low-profile, black operation. She used a third party and they were experts. I sat back, running my hand through my hair. Zola's power was frightening. She had found a way to erase Nomusa, not through violence but through erasure, making her disappear back into the anonymity she came from, while simultaneously taking everything she owned. My focus immediately shifted to my son. I needed to see Simphiwe to counter Zola's poison, but he was at the Sandhurst mansion, behind layers of guards and maternal manipulation. I drove straight to Houghton, where Mr. Langa, the silver fox, was waiting for me. I slammed the note onto his mahogany desk. Langa read this. Zola is claiming Nomusa left voluntarily. She has leveraged this to keep Simphiwe away from me. Langa calmly picked up the note, reading the elegant script. He sighed, adjusting his glasses. This is masterful, Nkosi. She hasn't violated the restraining order because she didn't touch Nomusa. She used coercion. And by claiming Nomusa fled, she confirms the media's narrative. The maid was a cynical opportunist who took your money and ran when the scandal became too hot. She turns your love into Nomusa's greed. I paid 10 million rand to save her life, Langa. She would never run. We need to find her. We need to file a missing persons report. A missing persons report on a woman who voluntarily resigned and relocated her family and business, according to the scene? It will only solidify Zola's story to the press, confirming she was a flight risk and a fraud. We need proof of coercion, not suspicion. And right now, Nomusa's testimony is the only proof that matters. So, what is the counter-strategy, Langa? I'm losing my son and the only woman I've ever loved because of a piece of paper and a lie. Langa steepled his fingers, his eyes focused and cold. The counter-strategy is twofold. First, the boardroom. Zola is mobilizing the board to declare you mentally unstable due to this scandal and your massive corporate fund transfer. We need to secure your control of Nkosi Holdings immediately. Second, Simphiwe. We must take him away from Zola before she permanently poisons him. We use the one thing Zola cannot control, her own father. The former minister? I asked, surprised. Zola's father, Minister Chabalala, was an imposing figure, a man of rigid old-school African values who despised scandal and loved Simphiwe deeply. Minister Chabalala hates scandal more than he loves Zola's money. He sees the public mess Zola is creating, the police involvement, the whispers of kidnapping, the chaos. He sees the potential ruin of the Nkosi Chabalala name. He cares about legacy, not social media drama. Langa smiled faintly. I will leak, discreetly, that Zola is under police suspicion for corporate espionage and extortion, related to the 10 million rand payment you made. I won't name Nomusa, but I will frame it as Zola using criminal methods against you. Minister Chabalala will see the threat to his reputation and force Zola's hand. I authorized the plan. Langa moved with surgical speed, planting the rumors about corporate espionage. The effect was immediate. That evening my phone rang. It was Minister Chabalala, his voice booming with fury, not at me, but at the chaos Zola had created. Dumisani. What is this nonsense about police and extortion? My name is being mentioned. I built my career on integrity. Minister Zola has become unstable. She is creating a public spectacle and has involved criminal elements. She coerced Nomusa, the founder of the foundation's largest initiative, into disappearing. She is using Simphiwe as a weapon. I need my son, Minister. Zola is destroying the Nkosi name. The minister paused, breathing heavily. He knew his daughter. He knew the depths of her entitlement. I will handle Simphiwe, the minister declared sternly. I will not allow my grandson to be caught in this gutter warfare. Simphiwe will be transferred to my private residence in Pretoria tomorrow. He will be neutral territory until you and Zola sort out this madness. Thank you, Minister. That is all I ask. A weight lifted off my shoulders. Simphiwe was safe from Zola's direct manipulation. Now I could focus entirely on finding Nomusa. Mavuso and I created a task force. We focused on the fact that the entire workshop had been professionally moved. The one person who would benefit from Nomusa's departure, besides Zola, was a business rival. Nomusa's legacy was about traditional, high-end African design. There was only one major rival in that niche, the House of Dlamini, run by a powerful, ruthless fashion tycoon named Mrs. Dlamini. Mrs. Dlamini was Zola's close friend and social rival. She had a history of poaching talent and crushing competition. Nomusa's sudden success would have been a direct threat. I authorized Mavuso to use every resource to track the movement of the sewing machines, the specialized bolts of cotton, and the unique patterns of Amashweshwa. We tracked the suppliers Nomusa had used and cross-referenced their delivery logs with Mrs. Dlamini's known storage facilities. The next morning Mavuso called me, his voice a mix of triumph and horror. Nkosi, we found them. They are in a massive, secluded warehouse in a business park outside Krugersdorp. It's owned by a shell company, but the logistics match the House of Dlamini. We have a visual. Nomusa, her mother, and the 2 children are inside. They are safe, but they are not free. They are working, under duress. Nkosi. Working? What do you mean working? They are sewing, Nkosi. They are replicating Nomusa's unique patterns. They are working under the supervision of Mrs. Dlamini's staff. It's a sweatshop operation. Zola didn't just make Nomusa disappear, she sold her and her expertise to her biggest business rival. Zola got her money back from the fund she transferred, and Mrs. Dlamini got a world-class, forced design team. The cruelty of the scheme was breathtaking. Zola had not only invalidated my love for Nomusa by making her seem greedy but had also weaponized Nomusa's unique talent for profit, effectively enslaving her and her entire family. I immediately called Langa. Langa, we have them. Nomusa is being held and forced to work by Dlamini, Zola's friend. It is human trafficking and corporate espionage. We have the location. We are going in. Langa was hesitant. We need police involvement, Nkosi. This is too dangerous for a private operation. Dlamini is protected. We don't have time for the police. If we wait, Dlamini will move them. I'm going there now. You get the warrants and meet me there with the police in 1 hour. I am going in for my woman. I grabbed my car keys, adrenaline coursing through me. I didn't care about the board, the stock price, or the minister. I was simply a man going to rescue the woman whose spirit he loved. I arrived at the sprawling, isolated warehouse complex. Mavuso's men were already positioned, waiting for the signal. I grabbed a small, unregistered communication device and put on a bulletproof vest. Mavuso, I'm going in through the main service entrance. Give me 5 minutes to get Nomusa and the children. If I'm not back, you breach the perimeter. I walked toward the building, my heart pounding. I was no corporate warrior now, I was a man fighting for his family. I found Nomusa in a brightly lit, sterile room, hunched over a sewing machine, her face drawn, her dignity still intact despite the degradation. The children were huddled silently on a makeshift bed in the corner. "Nomusa," I whispered, rushing toward her. She looked up, her eyes widening in astonishment, then filling with immense, soul-deep relief. "Nkosi, you came. I knew you would." I grabbed her hand. "We have to move. Mavuso's team is outside. We are getting out now." But just as I started to pull her toward the door, a sudden, powerful voice stopped us cold. "Going somewhere, Dumisani?" I spun around. Standing in the doorway, blocking our only exit, was Mrs. Dlamini, impeccably dressed, flanked by two immense, stone-faced security guards. "Fikal, let her go. You are facing human trafficking charges, not just corporate espionage. You do not want a battle with Nkosi Holdings." Fikal Dlamini laughed, a cold, brittle sound that echoed Zola's own. "Oh, I don't think you understand, Dumisani. Zola and I were simply completing a transaction. I paid handsomely for Nomusa's talent. And she paid me a much higher price to ensure you never find her again." She stepped aside, and behind her, stepping out of the shadows, was the last person I ever expected to see. It was Simphiwe. He stood there, pale and conflicted, holding a small duffel bag. He looked directly at me, his eyes filled with a shattering mixture of betrayal and defiance. "Baba," Simphiwe said, his voice flat. "Mama told me you were here. She told me you were going to drag Nomusa away. She asked me to choose. And I have chosen." He walked past Fikal, stopping in front of Nomusa's makeshift workstation. He didn't look at Nomusa. He reached into his duffel bag and pulled out a small, worn object. It was the ancestral gold ring, the one I had left untouched on my office table. Simphiwe tossed the ring onto the sewing table. It landed with a final, metallic clink, right next to Nomusa's trembling hand. "Mama told me to tell you, Nomusa, that you are just a mistake my father will never correct. The Nkosi name is mine, not yours. And now you will never see him again." Then Simphiwe walked over to the door and deliberately locked it from the inside, trapping me, Nomusa, and her family in the warehouse, entirely at the mercy of Fikal Dlamini and her armed guards. The metallic clink of the ancestral gold ring hitting the sewing table was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It echoed the final, irrevocable shattering of my hope for reconciliation with my son. Simphiwe stood by the locked door, his young face set in a mask of grim determination, a pawn perfectly deployed by Zola. He hadn't just betrayed me, he had sealed our fate, locking us into a dangerous trap. My mind reeled, trying to reconcile the boy I raised, the gentle, intelligent boy who once spent hours listening to my stories of the village, with this cold stranger standing guard for my enemy. "Simphiwe, what have you done?" I roared, taking a step toward him. Mrs. Fikal Dlamini's two massive guards immediately stepped in front of me, their hands subtly moving toward the weapons holstered at their hips. "Don't strain yourself, Dumisani," Fikal purred, enjoying the scene. She picked up the ancestral ring from the sewing table, turning it over in her manicured fingers. "Your son made a wise choice. Family over fantasy. The Nkosi name requires protection from ruinous passions." I turned my attention to Nomusa, whose face was pale, but whose eyes held a fierce light. She quickly gathered her mother and children behind her, shielding them. "Nkosi, do not engage. We must think," she whispered urgently. "Simphiwe," I pleaded, ignoring Fikal and speaking directly to my son, "your mother lied to you. I divorced her because she was cold and destructive. She didn't want this ring. She sold Nomusa, her mother, and her children into forced labor for Fikal, her friend. Look at the children, Simphiwe. Is this what Nkosi honor means? Enslaving innocent people for profit." Simphiwe flinched, his eyes darting toward the two small children huddled behind Nomusa. But Zola's programming was powerful. "Mama said you would try to trick me," Simphiwe muttered, his voice shaky but firm. "She said you would paint Nomusa as the victim to manipulate me. She showed me the documents, Baba. You transferred 50 million rand to the foundation before you divorced her. That money was supposed to be mine, for my education, for my inheritance. Nomusa is taking our legacy. Mama only stepped in to correct the balance." The depth of Zola's planning was chilling. She hadn't just focused on my emotions, she had successfully convinced Simphiwe that I had stolen his future to fund my affair. "The money is for legitimate empowerment, Simphiwe, not a mistress. And your inheritance is secure." I insisted, but the words sounded hollow against the hard facts Zola had manufactured. "Simphiwe is right, Dumisani," Fikal interjected smoothly, tucking the gold ring into her pocket. "The Nkosi legacy is about power, not philanthropy. Nomusa's legacy is now my asset. I paid Zola a significant sum to acquire the exclusive rights to Nomusa's design genius. You are here for trespass and corporate espionage. Your son is my witness. Fico pulled out a satellite phone, identical to my own private line. I'm going to call the police now, Dumisani. I will tell them you broke into my secure facility, attempted to kidnap my contracted staff, and are mentally unstable, which is why your board is already discussing replacing you. Your son will confirm your erratic behavior. If you call the police, I will tell them you are holding a family against their will. I retorted. And who will they believe? Fico smiled, a shark's grin. The discredited, divorcing CEO who lost control of his own son, or the respected fashion mogul with the CEO's son as a witness? And where is your proof of coercion, Dumisani? Nomusa has no external wounds, and she is merely a staff member in a business dispute. Fico raised the phone to call. This was the end. Zola had trapped me perfectly. I couldn't save Nomusa without confirming Zola's narrative of my instability and losing my son forever. Then Nomusa spoke, her voice clear, calm, and utterly commanding, cutting through the corporate venom and the familial betrayal. Mrs. Dlamini, you will not call the police. Fico scoffed, lowering the phone slightly. Oh, the maid speaks. And why not, Nomusa? Because your children will watch your CEO fail? No, Nomusa replied, stepping forward, facing Fico and Simphiwe directly. Her eyes were fixed on the ancestral ring Fico had pocketed. Because if you call the police, they will ask questions. Questions that will lead back to Zola. And what questions would those be? Fico challenged, amused. The questions about the second set of contracts, Nomusa said, her chin lifting in defiance. Fico's face froze. Her elegant composure cracked, revealing a flicker of genuine alarm. What are you talking about? Fico demanded, glancing nervously at her guards. Nomusa didn't look at me or Simphiwe. She spoke directly to Fico, woman to woman, rival to rival. When you arrived at the apartment, Mrs. Dlamini, you offered me a contract. It was a simple one-page document. It transferred my business assets to you for a sum of 10 million rand, which Zola told you was money stolen from my husband's inheritance. It had my signature, Nomusa Grace Mackay's, under coercion, and your signature. It was a clean, criminal transaction. Fico regained her composure, her eyes narrowing dangerously. It was a legitimate asset transfer, signed by you. But 2 hours later, Nomusa continued, her voice gaining strength, you returned. You had realized that transferring my business assets was not enough. You needed my unique design patterns, the patterns only I can make. You made me sign a second contract, a personal agreement. This one was not for the assets. This one was a lifetime design exclusivity contract, effectively making me and my mother your slaves. This is the one you are truly using to hold me here. A common non-compete. Fico hissed. No, Fico. It was a fraudulent contract because I signed it as Nomusa Grace Nkosi, Nomusa declared, raising her voice just enough to cut through the tension. Silence fell in the warehouse. Fico stared at Nomusa, aghast. I stared at Nomusa, astonished. Simphiwe, standing by the door, looked utterly confused. I signed the second contract with my married name, Mrs. Dlamini, Nomusa explained, calmly dismantling the entire structure of the conspiracy. Because your document stipulated that I would receive a significant relocation allowance for myself and my husband, who they assumed was Dumisani. I signed the name I will one day have. I did it because your document was already so deceitful. I knew I needed a counter-trap. She turned finally to Simphiwe. Simphiwe, the moment I signed that contract as Nomusa Nkosi, it became a document of criminal conspiracy between Mrs. Dlamini and your mother. Because Zola is not divorced yet. Your father is still legally married to Zola. For Mrs. Dlamini to fraudulently enter a contract with a woman claiming to be Nomusa Nkosi, the name of her close friend's rival, to acquire assets that Mrs. Dlamini knew were tied up in a high-profile divorce, that is not mere espionage. That is racketeering and fraud. It links Fico directly to Zola, and it proves that they were conspiring to steal not just my business, but the financial assets of the Nkosi name, using the false identity of a new wife. Fico Dlamini's face was the picture of pure, panicked fury. She had been so focused on acquiring the assets and the designs that she hadn't noticed the subtle, devastating change in the signature. A signature that now made the document an irrefutable link to Zola's criminal intent. You peasant witch. You set a trap. Fico screamed, raising her hand to strike Nomusa. Before she could land the blow, I moved. I lunged forward, not toward Fico but toward the nearest metal piping on the wall. The guards, startled by Fico's outburst, were milliseconds too slow. I ripped the pipe free with a surge of desperate strength, turning the corporate warrior back into the farm boy of Newcastle. Stay back, I warned, swinging the pipe in a wide arc, the sound of the metal slicing the air shocking the guards. Mavuso, reach now. I have the target. I yelled into my hidden communication device. Feichel's guards reacted instantly, drawing their firearms. The moment of impact was upon us. Simphiwe, get down, I yelled, pulling Nomusa behind the massive metal pipe as the external wall of the warehouse suddenly exploded inward, showering the room with dust, metal and light. Captain Mavuso and his team, wearing black tactical gear, streamed into the warehouse, guns raised, shouting demands for the guards to drop their weapons. The shock and speed of the breach, a distraction I had paid dearly for, worked perfectly. Feichel's guards, caught off guard, hesitated. Feichel, however, did not. She grabbed the sat phone, intending to call the police before Mavuso's team secured her. Simphiwe, still standing by the locked door, was caught in the crossfire. He looked at the chaos, the armed men, the dirt and fear on Nomusa's face, the desperate look on my own, and he finally saw the truth. This was not a tawdry affair. This was a war for survival, and his mother was on the side of the criminals. He lunged not at me but at Feichel, knocking the satellite phone from her hand just as she was dialing. Stop. Leave her alone. Simphiwe screamed, pushing Feichel hard. Feichel stumbled back in fury, crashing into one of her guards. The distraction was all Mavuso needed. He shouted the final command. The guards were neutralized and disarmed in seconds. The room fell silent once more, broken only by the whimpering of Nomusa's children. Feichel Dlamini was pinned to the floor, defeated. Simphiwe stood trembling, his loyalty finally and agonizingly clear. I rushed to Simphiwe, wrapping him in a fierce hug. My son, you chose the truth. You chose honor. I am so sorry, Baba, he choked out, burying his head in my shoulder. Mama, she lied about everything. I saw the fear in Nomusa's face. I finally saw it. I looked at Nomusa, who was holding her children close, tears of relief streaming down her face. She was safe. The police, led by a surprisingly swift Mr. Lenga, arrived moments later. Feichel Dlamini, screaming about betrayal and illegal breach, was arrested, along with her guards, based on Lenga's hastily secured corporate espionage warrant. The Nomusa Nkosi contract was the final nail in her corporate coffin. I escorted Nomusa, her mother, and the children out of the warehouse. Nomusa walked out with her head high, leaving the gold ring and the shredded remnants of Zola's power on the floor behind her. The next morning the headlines were devastating. Nkosi CO vindicated. Wife's criminal plot to enslave mistress and steal assets exposed. Zola's name was now irrevocably tied to extortion, fraud, and human trafficking. The minister, disgusted and mortified, completely disowned her. I was back in my Houghton office, my son by my side, Nomusa in a secure new home I had purchased for her family. My control over Nkosi Holdings was absolute. I had won. But I still had to face the man who had lost everything. Simphiwe stood before me, the guilt heavy on his shoulders. Baba, I betrayed you. I sided with the lie. I helped the enemy. I have no right to ask this, but what happens now? To me? And to Nomusa? I looked at my son and I saw the resilience of the Nkosi lineage, the capacity to fail, admit error, and fight for redemption. Your mother will face the consequences of her actions. As for you, you will spend the next year working. Not at the top of Nkosi Holdings but at Nomusa's legacy. You will learn what it means to build an honest life from the ground up, to work with your hands, and to respect the dignity of labor. Nomusa will be your boss. She will teach you honor. And Nomusa? Simphiwe asked, looking at me with new respect. Nomusa is my future, my son. And one day soon she will be your stepmother. I had won the woman, the company, and the son. I had everything I had lost and more. But the victory felt bittersweet. Days later, a final, stunning report came from Captain Mavuso. Zola, facing utter ruin, had fled the country. She had liquidated the enormous financial settlement I had given her and vanished into South America. The Nkosi name was free. I drove to Nomusa's new, modest home. I walked to the kitchen and found her cooking a traditional Zulu meal, the scent of the spices filling the home with a warmth the Sandhurst mansion never knew. Nomusa, I said, placing the recovered ancestral ring back on the table. The war is over. Zola is gone. My son is redeemed. I am free. Will you marry me, and bring the true heart of our people back to the Nkosi name? She took my hand, her touch warm and firm. Yes, Dumisani. I will. But I want a traditional ceremony first. I want my family to meet yours and I want Simphiwe to stand as your witness. Our future must be built on the right foundation. I agreed, happiness finally overwhelming the exhaustion of battle. But as I pulled her close, a small dark shadow of dread passed over me. Nomusa pulled back slightly, her expression suddenly serious, her eyes fixed on the ancestral ring on the table. Dumisani, there is one last thing you need to know. It's about the gold ring. When Zola rejected it 15 years ago, she did not just reject the gold. She rejected the inscription inside. You never noticed it, did you? It is an old tribal warning and it is crucial to our safety. She picked up the ring, turning it to reveal a faint, nearly invisible inscription carved into the gold band, an inscription that promised not just love, but a terrifying, hidden consequence of the union. Nomusa's sudden gravity and the mention of a hidden, crucial inscription on the ancestral ring immediately stopped the swell of my triumph. The warmth of the kitchen faded, replaced by a cold, unsettling premonition. I had just navigated a corporate and domestic minefield, but her face told me the greatest danger was still unknown. An inscription? What are you talking about, Nomusa? I asked, kneeling beside her, focusing entirely on the small, unassuming gold band. She picked up the ring, her thumb tracing the inner surface. Dumisani Nkosi family is old. You left the village young, chasing the city lights. But you were raised by your gogo. Didn't she teach you about the ancestral pact? I shook my head, my memories of childhood hazy with the pursuit of commerce. I remember the stories, the songs, but the pact. No. This ring is not just jewelry. It's the symbol of the pact, she explained, holding it up so the faint light from the window caught the inscription. It was written in a rare, archaic form of Zulu, almost illegible. I saw it when Zola had me under duress in Feikel's warehouse. I had time to look closely at it. This inscription says, Umfazi Okamba Manga, Ukuyula Isathunzi. I repeated the words, translating them slowly, the true meaning hitting me with staggering force. Umfazi Okamba Manga, a woman who speaks lies, Ukuyula Isathunzi, frees the shadow. Nomusa nodded, her eyes wide with urgency. It is the ultimate warning from your ancestors, Dumisani. The pact states that the Nkosi patriarch can only marry a woman of absolute truth, one whose spirit is clean. If the chosen wife is deceitful or enters the marriage under false pretenses, if she speaks lies, the marriage itself is void, but the husband's shadow is freed. Frees the shadow? What does that mean in the city, Nomusa? It's a superstition, an old legend. I protested, trying to dismiss the ancient warning with modern logic. It is not a legend, Dumisani. It is a curse. A physical consequence that follows the betrayal of the pact. Think. Zola rejected the ring, but she still married you. She built your life on the biggest lie of all, the lie of a loving partnership, of shared values. She was deceitful from the start, chasing the status, not the man. I stared at her, a cold dread replacing my skepticism. And the shadow, what is the shadow? The shadow is the curse of infertility. When a man with the pact marries a deceitful woman, the ancestors remove the ability to pass on the Nkosi bloodline, to ensure the lineage is not contaminated by lies. The Nkosi heir after the deceitful marriage is never the biological child of the patriarch. The husband is cursed with sterility, and the first son belongs to the Isathunzi, the shadow she brought with her. My breath hitched. My mind immediately went to Simphiwe. My pride, my heir, the son I had fought a corporate war to protect. No, I whispered, stumbling back. No, Simphiwe is my son. He is the heir. Dumisani, think about Zola, Nomusa insisted, her voice soft with pity. Zola was always distant, always obsessed with material things. Did she ever speak of Simphiwe's heritage, his resemblance to your family? Did she ever show genuine maternal warmth, or was she always focused on his status? I remembered the years of indifference, the transactional nature of our parenthood. I remembered the lavish overseas school and Zola's quick dismissal of his feelings, always focused on reputation. The pact was broken 15 years ago. Your son is exactly 18 now, the same amount of time that has passed since your marriage, Nomusa stated, connecting the devastating dots. She knew, I whispered, the full horrifying depth of Zola's betrayal washing over me. She knew the consequence of the broken pact, or perhaps she simply knew she married me for the money and ensured the heir was secured elsewhere. The true lie was never just about our marriage, it was about the Nkosi bloodline. I stood up, my corporate warrior instincts kicking in. If Simphiwe is not my son, then Zola used him as a tool of corporate control and ultimate leverage. The entire 15 years, everything, was a lie. The inheritance, the control of the board, everything hinges on Simphiwe being the rightful heir. The legal and corporate implications were catastrophic. If Simphiwe was not my biological son, he had no automatic claim to the Nkosi dynasty, and Zola, by passing off a false heir, had committed the ultimate corporate fraud, threatening the legitimacy of every board decision tied to the Nkosi lineage. I have to know the truth, Nomusa. I have to know if Simphiwe is the Isathunzi, the shadow son. There is only one way to know, Dumisani. The modern way, not the ancestral way. You need a DNA test. I acted immediately. Using my vast security network, I secured a discreet DNA test kit. I couldn't approach Simphiwe directly, not after everything. The opportunity came that evening. Simphiwe, still seeking redemption, was working late at the new Nomusa's legacy workshop in Soweto, learning bookkeeping from one of Nomusa's new managers. I drove there, waited until he left, and retrieved a sample from his discarded water bottle. It was a humiliating, furtive act for the proud CEO, but the fate of my company and my soul depended on it. I flew the sample out to a private, specialized lab in Switzerland that very night, using a private jet and a trusted courier. The wait was excruciating. 3 days later, the secure report landed on my screen. I opened it with shaking hands. The finding was absolute, definitive, and devastating. Probability of paternity between Dumisani Nkosi and Simphiwe Nkosi, 0.0001%, exclusion. Simphiwe was not my son. He was the Isathunzi. The immediate consequences were terrifying. Zola hadn't just secured her freedom, she had set up a time bomb that would explode my company's structure the moment the truth was revealed. The Nkosi legacy was compromised. I returned to Nomusa's home, the sterile report clutched in my hand. She saw the answer in my face. The shadow was real, Nomusa. He is not mine. Nomusa embraced me, her warmth offering the only comfort against the cold truth. Simphiwe's blood does not matter, Dumisani. His heart does. He chose your honor. He is the son of your spirit, if not your body. But the company, Nomusa. The board will use this to declare all my actions null. Zola will claim I committed fraud by hiding the truth. This is the financial ruin she promised. No, Dumisani, Nomusa said, her eyes glinting with the same fierce intelligence that had trapped Fikal Dlamini. This is the ultimate proof of Zola's criminal fraud. You did not hide the truth, she perpetrated the lie. You have the ancestral pact inscription, the DNA test, and the evidence of her extortion to save your presumed son's life. Zola is the criminal, not you. She pulled out the gold ring again. But there is one final thing the inscription means. The Nkosi bloodline is only restored when the husband marries a woman of truth, one who completes the pact. That is me, Dumisani. And the ancestor's promise is this: the bloodline will be restored through the first son of the second wife. She smiled, a hint of something deeper in her eyes. I am already pregnant, Dumisani. I am carrying your true Nkosi heir. My heart soared, the pain of the past 15 years melting away in the face of this impossible, miraculous truth. I was restored. The ancestor's pact was fulfilled through Nomusa. The final confrontation had to be perfect. I called an emergency Nkosi Holdings board meeting, a public announcement, and I ensured every major news outlet was present, including Simphiwe, who sat stone-faced by my side. I stood before the board and the cameras, not as the wounded CEO but as the patriarch. I have called this meeting to address the corporate sabotage and personal attacks orchestrated by my former wife, Zola Nkosi. While my divorce is now final, the lies she perpetrated threatened the very foundation of this company. I detailed Zola's corporate crimes, her use of criminal elements, and I then revealed the DNA report. The room erupted. Simphiwe is not my biological son, I announced, the words ringing with absolute truth. He is the victim of a 15-year fraud designed to ensure Zola's control over my fortune. The true Nkosi heir, the restoration of my lineage, will come through my future wife, Nomusa Makais. I looked directly at the cameras, addressing the invisible Zola. Zola, you are a criminal, a fraud, and a fugitive. You played the shadow and you lost. The Nkosi name is purified, and the bloodline is restored. I turned to Simphiwe, who looked pale but proud. Simphiwe Nkosi is not my son by blood, but he is the son of my heart. He chose honor over luxury and truth over the lie. He will remain my adopted son, my first son, and the vice president of the Nkosi Holdings Charitable Foundation, working side by side with his mother, Nomusa, to build the true legacy of our people. Simphiwe stood up, embracing me fiercely before turning to the press. I am proud to be the son of Dumisani Nkosi. And I am proud to work for my mother, Nomusa. 6 months later. The wedding was a spectacle of traditional Johannesburg elegance and Zulu roots. I married Nomusa in a lavish ceremony that respected both the city and the village. Simphiwe stood proudly as my best man. Nomusa, radiant and beautiful, wore a dress of vibrant ameshweshwe, designed and stitched by the women of Nomusa's legacy. I had won back my company, my son, and my legacy. Nomusa, the former maid, was now the legitimate matriarch of the Nkosi dynasty. But the final shock came 1 year later with a single, untraceable message sent to my private office line. It was an image sent from deep in the Amazon where Zola was hiding. The image was a newspaper clipping from a small local South American paper. It featured a blurred photo of a local businessman, a known criminal involved in high-stakes money laundering, a man Zola had clearly married for protection. But the headline was what made me gasp, the ultimate terrifying twist of the knife, revealing Zola's final enduring lie. Local tycoon celebrates birth of twin sons, names them after beloved ancestors. Zola was not cursed. She had a biological son. 2 of them. I realized the horrifying truth. The ancestral pact had not fallen on Zola, it had fallen on me. The curse was mine. The biological father of Simphiwe was not Zola's shadow lover, but me. I was the one who had been sterile during my marriage to Zola, a biological truth she chose to hide to secure her own succession plan. My fertility had only been restored by the power of the Makai's lineage, by Nomusa's clean spirit, fulfilling the ancient prophecy. I had just risked my entire company and pushed my presumed sterile self onto the wrong woman, while the true biological heir, my firstborn Simphiwe, was not the shadow, but had been stolen from me by a lie that was deeper and more permanent than I could have ever imagined.